Live from downtown Vancouver, broadcasting around the province of British Columbia and on the Chorus Radio Network. This is The Bill Good Show.
Harold Foster is a professor at the University of Victoria in the Department of Geography. He lost his wife to cancer and through that experience dedicated his career to finding out what causes cancer and other debilitating disease. Harold Foster, good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
You wrote a series of books about what causes cancer and other debilitating diseases. What did you determine?
Oh, gee. That's asking me to describe best part of 25 years research in a couple of brief sentences. What did I determine? A large number of illnesses are caused by mineral deficiencies, and that if you take the right minerals, and in many cases vitamins, in the correct doses, you can prevent the disease, and also in many cases you can reverse it and cure it, or at least prevent it returning.
So you're telling me that if I take the right vitamins, I can reduce my risk of cancer or eliminate my risk of cancer or AIDS or schizophrenia, illnesses like that?
Yes, I am, although you're misusing the word vitamin. Vitamin is only part of it. I mean, there are about 50 things that are essential in the human diet, and they include vitamins, they include minerals, they include essential fatty acids, amino acids, etc. So it's not just vitamins, although many people use the term widely when really they're including all those nutrients.
So how does one determine what they need to take to protect themselves against these various diseases?
I'm not a medical doctor. It would get me into great trouble if I tried to diagnose. Ideally, you can have the levels of all those things in your body monitored, and then if you are particularly low in any of them, you need to move up into at least the average, in many cases above the average intake of those nutrients. But I mean, for each one of those illnesses, I have looked at the distribution patterns, tried to work out exactly what was promoting that illness. For example, if you look at Alzheimer's, exposure to monomeric aluminum is the major cause of Alzheimer's disease, but it is only very dangerous in people who are short of silica and calcium and magnesium. So there are, if you're worried about a particular illness, then there are certain substances you need to take to prevent it. For example, the first book I wrote, Reducing Cancer Mortality, I looked at the distribution of mortality from 66 types of cancer, groups of cancers in the United States, compared it with about 217, I think it was, environmental variables, and worked out what appeared to be the most protective, again, and what appeared to promote. Protective nutrients are things like selenium, calcium, magnesium, and I also showed that exposure to vitamin D, sunlight, and the production of vitamin D was very important for protecting against some cancers. So you can calculate what are particularly important for specific diseases, but ideally, of course, you need optimum levels of all those nutrients to protect you against a wide range of illnesses.
Now, I mentioned that you're a professor in the Department of Geography. How can geography predict disease?
Well, most disease is not, the dominant factor in most disease is not genetics, it's environment. And it's the environment that controls how important the genes are and not the other way around. So let me give you an example. Right at the moment, I'm in the middle of writing a book on SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome.
Yes.
These are the steps that I'm going through. The first thing I've done is looked at the patterns of death from SIDS over a 5-year period in the United States and compared those patterns with the death and illness from 84 other diseases and disorders. What you find when you do that is that SIDS has a pattern, a spatial distribution pattern, that is almost identical to that of goiter before the addition of iodine to table salt. So that's step one. Step two, I looked at the distribution pattern of death from SIDS for those 5 years and compared it with 221 environmental variables. what you find is that there's a very strong correlation between iodine-deficient soils and SIDS. So here we have a hypothesis that SIDS is really a malfunction of the thyroid. That's the first two steps. The third step is to use what we call a Bradford-Hill criteria, to look at whether really this is a cause and effect relationship. There are 9 criteria. So I've done that, looked at whether it's biologically plausible, whether there is a dose-response relationship, etc., etc. In other words, does it make sense that a malfunction of the thyroid would be causing SIDS? The fourth step is to design prevention for SIDS, which becomes very obvious if you know what's causing it. And then finally, you need to test, film, and produce something for marketing. We should do more than that. We should apply it, because there are millions of people out there suffering unnecessarily from illnesses.
But are you telling me you can reverse AIDS?
Absolutely. We've done it for hundreds and hundreds of people already. We've been running trials in South Africa, in Uganda, in Zambia, in Botswana, with different collections of nutrients. I worked out how HIV was causing AIDS, and from that I could easily predict what you needed to do to prevent it and to reverse it.
Can you tell me a little bit about the study you did at the Mengo Hospital in Uganda? We're going to have to break in about a minute and a half for the news, but I'd like you to start before we go to the news, and then we'll come back for a fuller description. Yes,
okay. It was a 310-patient trial. They were all HIV-positive patients. They wouldn't let us actually use people who had full-blown AIDS. And they were given one set of nutrients which had 30 nutrients in it, or another set that had 37 nutrients in it. We ran it for a year. We've run the statistical tests on the results. Essentially what we found is that both groups, by and large, the majority of them have recovered. They are now in better health than they were, a lot better health than they were when they started the trial. Their CD4 counts have gone up. Their glutathione peroxidase levels, which are the key to AIDS, are about 2.5 times as high as they were when they started the trial. Their quality of life indices have gone up. Their weights have gone up. All of these improvements are statistically significant.
Looking back, and I hope this is not an inappropriate question, but if you look back, would your wife's treatment have been different?
Absolutely.
How?
My wife had all the conventional treatments, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, etc., etc. It didn't do her the slightest good. There are some very interesting breakthroughs in the treatment of cancer. What I would say, though, is that we would have eaten very differently in terms of more calcium, more selenium. We'd have had more exposure to sunlight and so on. I don't believe my wife would ever have had cancer under those circumstances. I will say this, by the way, I shall get into trouble from my second wife if I don't mention the fact that I've remarried and that I am happily married to my second wife.
We have a ton of people wanting to speak to you, so I'm going to go to calls. Larry, hi.
Why, with all the millions and millions of dollars that are raised in charities, would there not be money to sponsor something like this, which appears to have credibility? Certainly the people behind it have credibility. And I'm curious, and I've always been curious to know why that money, or at least some of that money, couldn't be used to, in fact, sponsor research into a product like this.
You cannot patent a substance that's natural. And in fact, the best way to treat all these illnesses and to prevent them is with natural substances.
And much of what you're talking about does not suggest staying away from traditional medicine or health care. It's talking about alternatives to it, many of which can be used in a preventative form.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that the treatments of the 21st century will be orthomolecular.
But are you telling me you can reverse AIDS?
Absolutely. We've done it for hundreds and hundreds of people already. I think we should do more than that. We should apply it, because there are millions of people out there suffering unnecessarily